Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. As we are going into election overtime here, we have 6 states that have voting litigation and controversies. This from dailysignal.com. And it's a little long, so I'll just highlight the states. However, I will read the beginning. The presidential election has continued into overtime in the courts on multiple fronts as President Donald Trump declines to concede the contest to Democrat challenger Joe Biden. Even as states kept counting ballots, no state had certified results, and lawsuits began to work their way through the courts. Major media outlets announced 4 days after election day that the former vice president had won the presidency by exceeding the necessary 270 electoral votes. Biden now leads by varying margins in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin, most of which had showed Trump ahead on election night. To explain what's happening in the courts, here's an overview of the litigation and related election controversies in the most contentious states. Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes, and the vote spread is Biden leads Trump by about 63,000 votes. It says that a Pennsylvania appeals court delivered a victory Thursday to the Trump campaign by blocking mail-in votes by anyone who didn't provide required information by the November 9 deadline. And it says that the Trump campaign is suing in both Pennsylvania state court and in federal courts. Trump campaign's lawsuit alleges that Pennsylvania's two-tiered election system that favored mail-in ballots over in-person voting violates the Constitution's Electoral Protection Clause and the Elections and Electors Clause. And Secretary of State Booker authorized counties to set mail-in votes aside at 8:38 p.m. on November 2nd. Former Kansas Attorney General Philip Klein, director of the Amistad Project, and said large metropolitan counties had an advantage in adjusting to the state notice that smaller rural counties didn't. In other words, Klein said blue counties had an advantage over red counties. And Klein stressed that there's no rush as this and as the litigation go forward. States have until December 8th to certify the electors. The Electoral College is set to meet December 14, and Inauguration Day is January 20, 2021. It's important to hit the pause button. This is not a constitutional crisis, Klein said. We have to get this right. Election officials need to be accountable. And it says that 3 Pennsylvania counties, Bucks, Chester, and Delaware, reported inaccurate voter registration information to the federal government. Judicial Watch reported in November more than 21,000 names on Pennsylvania's voter registration rolls belong to voters who are dead, according to Public Interest Legal Foundation and the Election Integrity Law Group, or Watchdog Group. Now, this doesn't mean that all or any of those voters were recorded as having voted. Only that Pennsylvania has been deficient in cleaning up its voter rolls as required by the Help America Vote Act. Of the total number, at least 9,212 of those still listed as registered voters died in the past 5 years, and at least 197 have been dead longer than 20 years. Now, Michigan, with 16 electoral votes, Biden leads Trump by about 147,000 votes. Michigan would be the most difficult state to flip, but the Trump campaign, as well as independent groups and voters, have raised several questions. 4 Michigan voters filed a federal lawsuit alleging fraud and asking that election results be excluded from 3 counties. Among issues in the Detroit-Wayne County area, Republican election officials could not see past cardboard put up to cover glass while workers counted votes. And it it goes on to say that separately, Thomas More Law Center's Amistad Project filed a suit in Michigan to list first-hand eyewitnesses who say they saw Democratic election observers filling out new ballots for votes their machines couldn't read. State law requires that observers from both parties agree on the intent of the voter before the ballot is marked. In Michigan, they're talking about the intent of the voter and counting the ballots, and the law requires members of the Republican and Democrat parties to observe. Klein told the Daily Signal. And there are numerous other observers made assertions about backdating and backtiming. However, Detroit Elections Director George Azos told CNN that the date of January 1, 1900 is often used in the electronic poll book as a temporary placeholder for absentee ballots arriving just before Election Day. A separate lawsuit filed on behalf of two Detroit area residents claims that Wayne County election officials knowingly allowed illegal activities including validating ballots with names on them weren't in the voter database, ordering of election workers not to verify voter signatures on mail-in ballots, and counting of ballots that appeared after the deadline. Nevada has 6 electoral votes, and Biden leads Trump by more than 35,000 votes. Of the 6 states in question, Nevada is the only one that Trump didn't carry in 2016. He came close in 2020. The Trump campaign alleges that at least 3,000 out-of-state residents voted in Nevada. Lawyers with the campaign sent a list of suspect voter information to U.S. Attorney General William Barr, asking for a federal inquiry. The lawyer's letter to Barr reads in part, specifically, we have initially identified 3,062 individuals who appear to have improperly cast mail ballots in the election. We verify this by cross-referencing the names and addresses of voters with the National Change of Address database. Of course, voter fraud is a serious federal felony, one that cuts to the heart of our representative democracy. We understand that there are serious legal allegations and we do not make them lightly. The American Civil Liberties Union of Nevada counters that some of the names in question are those of members of the armed services who currently live outside the state. Clark County, home of Las Vegas and key to Biden's victory in the state, had a voter registration rate of 102% of eligible voters, according to Judicial Watch. Georgia with 16 electoral votes. Trump trails by 14,000 votes there. Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger announced that the state would conduct a hand recount of ballots in the presidential election. With the measure being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in each county, Raffensperger, a Republican, said Wednesday. He added it will be an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once. The recount likely will be finished by November 20th, he said. Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes, and Biden leads Trump by about 20,000 votes. In Wisconsin, the counties of Rock and Milwaukee are facing scrutiny. State Assembly Speaker Robin Ross, a Republican, called for an investigation by the Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections. If there is real evidence of fraud, I want it to come forward to be able to be investigated. But if there is not, it validates the process and we should be fully supportive of it. Ross said, according to the Journal Times newspaper, adding, I would rather guarantee that everyone at the end of the day has certainty that the election was conducted fairly because we do a thorough investigation as opposed to trusting a bunch of bureaucrats in mass and saying, oh, look, we did it just fine. Now, Ross referred to absentee ballots from Milwaukee that were not reported until 4 a.m. on November 4th, 21 hours after polls opened. Election workers can begin counting ballots after the polls open on Election Day in Wisconsin. And it goes on to say that other Republicans, including presidential sons Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, raised questions about the Associated Press's first calling Rock County for their father before the news service reversed the call. Arizona with 11 electoral votes, Biden leads Trump by about 11,000 votes. The Trump campaign dropped a lawsuit in Arizona that claimed Arizona poll workers incorrectly rejected votes cast in person on Election Day. Trump campaign attorneys wrote late Thursday, since the close of yesterday's hearing, the tabulation of votes statewide has rendered unnecessary a judicial ruling as to the presidential electors. Biden appears to have flipped Arizona, a traditionally Republican state where the president had criticized two former GOP senators, Jeff Flake and the late John McCain. However, Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich, a Republican, said Wednesday that correcting the irregularity likely would affect only 200 votes. There is no evidence, there are no facts that would lead anyone to believe that the election results will change, he said. Now, it's interesting that it's those 6 states that have those issues, and it's interesting how close some of them are. So I mean, one of them, I think it was Georgia that had it until November 20, which is this Friday. So be interesting to see what happens there. However, given what's been happening, both parties have a lot to learn from this election. Got this coming from the Federalist.com. What does the leader of Britain's Labour Party have to teach American politics in the wake of an election? Quite a bit, it turns out. And no, I don't mean former Labour leader Neil Kinnock. Instead, Joe Biden learned far too much from him 33 years ago. The Labour Party's recent attempts to rehabilitate his image after 4 consecutive defeats and an election wipeout last December under leftist leader Jeremy Corbyn provide a compelling example for both of America's main political parties. That is, if the leaders of both of those parties take heed. Losses lead to elections and listening. 6 weeks ago, addressing the first party conference as Labor leader, and the first conference since the party's devastating defeat in last December's election, Keir Starmer pledged both to listen and to deliver a new approach. Let's be blunt. Let's be brutally honest with ourselves. When you lose an election in a democracy, you deserve to. You don't look at the electorate and ask them, what were you thinking? You look at yourself and ask, what were we doing? Starmer's conference speech intended to draw a clear line under Corbyn's leadership, where the party's far-left positions accelerated the migration of working-class voters to Boris Johnson's Conservative Party. After losing 4 straight general elections to the Conservatives, he told the Labour Party that it's time to get serious about winning. That means we have to change, and that's what we're doing. Democrats, mandate or mirage? Now compare Starmer's humility to the positions taken by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California, and Joe Biden. In a speech on Friday made before major news organizations called the presidential election in his favor, Biden claimed a mandate for action. Pelosi likewise claimed that Biden has a strong mandate to lead, and he'll have a strong Democrat House with him. But yet Biden's comments came amidst the reality that if 20,000 or so votes swing the other way in a couple of key states, Donald Trump and not Biden would stand on the inaugural platform January 20th to take the presidential oath a second time. As for Pelosi, her House Democrats lost at least half a dozen seats and could, after all the votes get counted and recounted, lose double that amount. The losses came despite an enormous crash advantage for Democrats across the board and predictions that Democrats would pick up seats rather than lose them. On both the congressional and presidential levels, those results can only classify as a mandate to someone with a magnifying glass or a microscope. Republicans shouldn't gloat. Now, that being said, Republicans also have reason for humility, albeit different ones. Despite the closeness of the Electoral College counts, Biden won the popular vote by at least 5.2 million votes, a margin that will likely increase in the coming days. Unlike Hillary Clinton in 2016, who could manage only a plurality of the vote, Biden won a majority of the nation's votes for president. A Republican candidate has managed to win a majority of America's votes only once in the past 8 election cycles, George W. Bush in 2004. Republicans also lost seats in the Senate, albeit fewer than expected, and saw Democrats retain control of the House, but the fact that Republicans have managed to win the most votes, let alone a majority of the votes, only once in the 32 years that Biden has been running for president, should give any Republican a massive pause. Leaders should listen. On the morning after the election, Politico ran an aptly titled column. Democrats look at Trump voters and wonder, what the hell is your problem? That blunt question summarizes much of official Washington's thinking about working class individuals or people in quote unquote flyover country. Those sentiments beat out in public, whether in Hillary Clinton's discussion of deplorables to laughter by the audience listening to her remarks, or Barack Obama's comments about people clinging to their guns and religion. Keir Starmer might tell Democrats that the fact they have to ask that type of question shows they deserve the results they received on Tuesday. Conversely, Republicans cannot expect to win the presidency with only 46 to 48% of the vote, and must expand their outreach to people of every race, class, and creed. After Britain's disastrous showing in the Boer War, Kipling wrote a poem describing the debacle which starts thusly: "Let us admit it fairly, as a business people should. We have had no end of a lesson, it will do us no end of good." Both parties should heed Sturmer and Kipling's words. As the country remains closely divided, the winner of the next election will likely come from the party that best sees the elections or the lessons of election 2020. And that they most definitely should. And now whoever wins the election, no no matter what, something needs to definitely be done about voter rolls and also voting software. This coming from townhall.com and Beth Bowman. It says, was the election software rigged? Sidney Powell lays out the Trump team's findings. Attorney Sidney Powell on Sunday Morning Futures said Trump's legal team is gathering evidence of election fraud that allegedly took place in election-related software like Dominion voting systems and Smartmatic. As it currently stands, Dominion is being utilized in 2,000 jurisdictions in 30 states. Texas decided not to use Dominion on 3 separate occasions because of fraud concerns. On top of that, former Admiral Peter Neffenger is chairman of the board of directors for Smartmatic. He is also on Vice President Joe Biden's transition team, which calls into question his impartiality, which doesn't pass the smell test. According to Powell, the Trump campaign has enough evidence to launch a serious criminal investigation. We're fixing to overturn the election results in multiple states, and President Trump won by not just hundreds of thousands of votes, but by billions of votes that were shifted by this software that was designed expressly for that purpose, Powell explained. We have sworn witness testimony about why the software was designed. It was designed to rig elections. According to Powell, the witness that the Trump team has is someone who has seen elections rigged in other countries. Those same tactics and software were allegedly deployed to the United States. They did this on purpose. It was calculated. They'd done it before, she said. We have evidence of 2016 in California. We have so much evidence, I feel like it's coming in through a fire hose. Host Maria Bartiromo pushed back, saying the election must be certified in a few weeks. She wanted to know if there was enough time for Powell and the team to produce evidence of the alleged wrongdoing. First of all, I never say anything I can't prove. Secondly, the evidence is coming in so fast that I can't even process it all. Millions of Americans have written by now, I would say definitely hundreds of thousands have stepped forward with their different experiences of voter fraud, but this is massive election fraud. And I'm very convinced if it not only involved Dominion and its Smartmatic software, but that the software was essentially used by other election machines also. Interestingly enough, Powell claimed that the software's user manual talks about how votes can be wiped away. It's absolutely brazen how people bought into this system and why they bought this system, the attorney said. Powell stated whistleblowers came forward over alleged paybacks. She said in states where the new election technology was purchased and implemented, there's evidence of officials' family members being paid large lump sums of money, rather. There are other concerns about how the software could be utilized. The attorney stated software and election result or officials have the ability to do things like delete ballots, force a machine not to read voters' signatures or the down ballot. Powell said there's also the ability for the machine to be programmed to only count votes for Biden. It's like drag and drop whatever you want, whenever you want, upload votes, she explained. The attorney said the campaign has a sworn affidavit from a person who knows how the system works and was allegedly there when the system was being created and implemented. That's just one example. There are many others. I know that there's a video out by Chanel Ryan of One American News that had an interview with Ron Watkins about Dominion software. So it's something to look into. However, you know, no matter what happens, you know, Pelosi is definitely panicking because she has a very slim majority in the House after this election. Got this from BizPackReview.com. Panic Pelosi urging House Dems not to join potential Biden administration, reports say. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's talk last week about how voters handed Democrats a mandate for action has already proven to be hollow, as party leadership desperately tried to hold its fragile majority in the lower chamber. Democrats have won 219 seats in the House, with 218 needed to win the majority. The party held 233 seats in the 2020 Congress. The Republican Party holds 203 seats, flipping at least 12, with 13 races yet to be called. This occurring as Joe Biden oddly outdrew more votes than President Trump. Operating on the belief that Biden will be the next president, the election outcome remains in flux as the Trump campaign pursues legal action in response to claims of voting improprieties. Democrat leaders dissuaded its House members from leaving to work for Biden administration. At a caucus meeting last week, the New York Post reported, Nancy is telling House members now is not the time to leave, said a party official who was briefed by Democrat congressional members. Ebony Bolden tweeted out on November 16th, Scoop. Concerned by their shrinking House majority, Speaker Pelosi and Steny Hoyer have been warning Democrat lawmakers not to accept key posts with the Biden administration. Nancy is telling House members, now is not the time to leave. The Post cited another House insider to say that House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Democrat Maryland, is urging Democrats to stay put and that he has told Biden's transition team to look elsewhere because of the slim majority they have following the election. It's not helpful to talk about that, a member of Democrat leadership reportedly said on last week's call, according to the newspaper. The feeling is don't make rash decisions about going to the administration without first considering consequences to the caucus, a Democrat insider familiar with the call said. The source said the Democrat House leadership zeitgeist is that their majority is razor thin. The 80-year-old speaker has come under fire for losing a number of seats the party was expected to hold, and there has been talk that Pelosi may have to scramble to get the votes needed to retain her gavel. And with the left faction of the party jockeying for influence in the Biden White House, radical progressives with no loyalty to Pelosi may jump at the chance to join. Naturally, Pelosi's office is denying reports that she is pressuring House Democrats not to, clinging to the myth of a mandate. This is completely false, spokesman Drew Hamill said, according to the Post. The Speaker wants a full contribution of House Democrats to the Biden-Harris mandate and to the future represented in the administration. The Biden transition team is already looking at a bipartisan list of 20 lawmakers serving in the House. If any of these members join a potential Biden administration, a special election would be held to fill the seat. Here's a quick sampling of responses from Twitter. Nancy, I have good news from Helsinger. Why they'll just lose a house in 2020 by a large margin. Tweeted out by Brian Barney. Confused Critter says, Den of Thieves, pretty sure any one of them would jump at the chance, love seeing her squirm. Angry Traveler says, sounds like she's a little shaky about the election. Official insert UGA quarterback Heisman campaign account, I Diggity Dogs, tweeted out, We have a mandate, but please don't force any special elections. David G. tweeted out, they should tell her they'll stay if there is a new speaker. And Maverick says, stay on my sinking ship. We have lots of alcohol. And that coming from BizPack Review. So speakership, speaker is going to be interesting as well. And as always, we will. I will definitely follow up on it in the days, weeks, and even months to come here. But let me know in the comments what you think on it. And of course, all of these articles that I've read will be parked in the description below if you wanted to take a look at it. And I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday, I brought up the fact that Pelosi is wanting House Dems not to go into a Biden administration for fear of losing their majority. That's just one of the things to watch out for in the House Democrat meetings this week. And as they're having leadership elections, this from rollcall.com. House Democrats this week will elect most of their leadership team for the 117th Congress, making choices in contested races that will determine the ideological, racial, and gender balance of caucus decision makers. The Democrat caucus will meet virtually Wednesday and Thursday to vote for all leadership positions, except Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee Chair and Freshman Leadership Representative. The DECCC election will occur the week of November 30th. The freshman class has yet to set a date for its election. This week's elections involve 3 contested races: Assistant Speaker, Caucus Vice Chair, and Caucus Leadership Representative, a position reserved for members who serve 5 terms or less. Here are 5 things to watch. As with many 2020 events, the COVID-19 pandemic prompted Democrats to hold their leadership elections virtually. If the voting application the Democrats set up for the elections works well, it could be used in the future to replace paper ballots, which are time-consuming to count. The encrypted application, automatically downloaded on members' House-issued iPhones, were designed in partnership with some of the nation's leading cryptologists. Democrat Caucus Chairman Hakeem Jeffries said in a Dear Colleague letter on Friday, votes will be secured by end-to-end encryption, and a member's vote will remain secret to everyone except for the member themselves. The New York Democrat added, each candidate will have a team of member tellers to monitor the encrypted electronic transmission and tabulation of votes during every election. The caucus will convene at 9 a.m. Wednesday over a video call to hear from candidates and vote, starting with Democrat Caucus Chair Since Jeffries, who is unopposed for a second term, oversees the remaining elections. These are typically held in ranking order, but could be shuffled to accommodate Wednesday's hard stop at noon. Remaining elections will be rolled to Thursday's session, which begins at 10 a.m. Every candidate can have supporters give nominating speeches and make remarks to the caucus. Jeffries and 3 other leaders running uncontested, including the top 3 of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, and Majority Whip James Clyburn, will likely be re-elected by acclamation. In races where a vote tally is ordered, members will have 15 minutes to vote on the app. Results will be announced on the video call. The first contested race is for the number 4 position of Assistant Speaker. It's a 2-way match between Massachusetts Representative Catherine M. Clark, the current caucus vice chairwoman, and Rhode Island Representative David Cicilline, who chairs the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. California's Tori Cardenas was running, but dropped out to run for DCCC chair. The number 6 position of vice chair is a 2-way race between Peter Aguilar of California and Robin Kelly of Illinois. Deb Haaland of New Mexico withdrew from the race Sunday. There are 4 candidates running for the 4 DPCC co-chair slots. The caucus voted earlier this fall to turn the chair position Cicilline holds into a 4th co-chair, so their vote could occur by acclamation. The The three current DPCC co-chairs, Michigan's Debbie Dingell, California's Ted Lieu, and Pennsylvania's Matt Cartwright are running for a second term, and Colorado's Joe Negris, currently a freshman leadership representative, is seeking a first term leading the messaging arm. Three candidates are running for caucus leadership representative. Michigan Representative Brenda Lawrence and freshman reps Jason Crow of Colorado and Colin Albert of Texas. Now, only members who have served 5 terms or less get to vote. Diversity. Diversity is always a factor in upcoming race or in leadership races, but it's most prevalent in the vice chair race, pitting a Latino against a black woman. The only Latino member currently in leadership, Assistant Speaker Ben Ray Lujan, is headed to the Senate. That means Aguilar, if elected, would become the highest-ranking Latino in leadership. I've got wide support from the Hispanic caucus, Aguilar said. They're my home, that's where I identify, where I have lunch. There are no black women on the elected leadership team, but California's Beverly, who unsuccessfully ran against Jeffries for caucus chair in 2018, is co-chair of the Democrat Steering and Policy Committee, a speaker-appointed position. Mondaire Jones to become the first openly gay black member of Congress. There's a video there. Kelly, if elected, would be the first black woman in top leadership post since Shirley Chisholm was elected caucus secretary in 1977. That position was later replaced by the vice chair vote. O'Connor tweeted out, "A black woman has not won and elected to House leadership to House caucus leadership since Shirley Chisholm. In 2020, we must change that. Representative Robin Kelly is the obvious choice. I have worked with her on diversity in tech and progressive causes. Let's finally break this calling." Now, as senior Democrat aide said, the timing is right with Senator Kamala Harris making history as the first black female vice president. I think that is only fair and right. That possibly translates into Democrat leadership, the aide said. The gender balance of the leadership team will rest on the outcome of the assistant speaker, caucus vice chair, and caucus leadership representative elections, where women are running against men. If Clark is elected assistant speaker, she'll become the second highest ranking House Democrat woman ever behind Pelosi. The leadership elections may also set records for LGBTQ representation. Cicilline, the first openly gay representative elected to leadership, would get a promotion if he wins against assistant speaker. If he and Sean Patrick Maloney, who is running for DCCC chair, both prevail, there'd be a record 2 openly gay Democrat leaders. Caucus endorsements. The Congressional LGBTQ+ Equality Caucus has endorsed Cicilline and Maloney, both the co-chairs of the group. It's unclear how much impact the endorsement will have, as it only requires 2/3 support of the group's 7 co-chairs, all LGBTQ members. The other Equality Caucus members are not bound to vote for Cicilline. A caucus endorsement that may carry more weight, however, is the moderate New Democrat Coalition's endorsement of Aguilar for vice chair. That required 2/3 support of the coalition's leadership and a simple majority of its overall 104 members. Aguilar, the New Democrats rep, far surpassed the needed votes to get the endorsement, Coalition Chairman Derek Clymer told CQ Roll Call. This is the first time the New Democrats, the largest ideological caucus in the House, has endorsed in a leadership race. Our endorsement or our support for Pete is grounded in having seen him up close and personal. He understands the diversity and backgrounds of districts our members come from, Clymer said. On Monday, the Hispanic caucus followed suit and endorsed Aguilar. The Hispanic caucus also endorsed Cardenas for DCCC speaker. One reason the New Democrats endorsed Aguilar is because moderates have been underrepresented in leadership. Most of the Democrats who lost re-election this cycle are moderates. The current leadership team has only 2 New Democrats, Sherry Bustos, the outgoing DCCC chairwoman, and Veronica Escobar, a freshman leadership representative who is also in the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Most of the leadership team are members of the Progressive Caucus, although a few, like the top 3, are unaffiliated. The two DCCC candidates, Cardenas and Maloney, are both New Democrats. Bustos will remain in leadership because Pelosi named her one of the steering co-chairs. All three candidates for caucus leadership representative are New Democrats, so Moderates will have at least 3 seats on the leadership table, and Aguilar Wynn would make it 4. Candidates in contested races, regardless of ideology, are all campaigning on their ability to bring the caucus together. That objective is more urgent with Democrats fighting among themselves after their election losses. Sisselin said the election reinforces the need for someone in leadership who has a proven record of bringing people together and forging consensus, and doing it with a very keen eye to making sure we project our majority. This week, House Democrats are electing a new assistant speaker, tweeted out Brian Higgins. We need a leader who understands the needs of the American people and someone who will put in the hard work to help deliver the results Americans deserve. That's why I'm supporting Representative David Sisselin. Now, Clark is campaigning on a unifying message as well, touting her recruitment and membership of members in swing districts, and her efforts as vice chairwoman to connect different sections of the caucus. Texas Representative Sylvia R. Garcia is backing Clark because she's got a knack for bringing people together. She is ripping votes for Clark and said many Hispanic caucus members who back Cardenas will likely vote for Clark. Lawrence said Democrats are a Big Ten party and it's not realistic to expect or ask people to fall in line. Rather, she plans to find ways to get everybody's voice in legislation. Loser landing spots. Now, while Democrats face different leadership contests, Pelosi often steps in and finds ways to keep allies around. The pattern started when Democrats lost a majority in 2010 and Pelosi created an assistant leader position, the minority equivalent of assistant speaker, for Clyburn to remain the number 3 and avoid a battle against Hoyer for rep. 2 years ago, Pelosi wanted to clear the path for Lou John to become assistant speaker after he helped Democrats win the majority as DCCC chairman. Sisselin agreed to drop out that race after Pelosi created the DPCC chair position for him to oversee the co-chairs. After Bustos decided not to run again for DCCC chair, Pelosi quickly appointed her as one of the steering and policy co-chairs to keep her in leadership. It's feasible Pelosi may find spots for losers in the contested races, especially Clark or Sisselin. Representative Mark Pocan, who co-chairs the Progressive Caucus, has endorsed Clark but said, I wish we could have them both in different positions. Asked if he thinks Pelosi may fulfill that wish, the Wisconsin Democrat said, you never know. Nancy always has a creative way of adding spots. You know, I mean, it's all well and good that she is doing that. However, you know, her main thing right now is to make sure that she has the leadership position. 1, 2, she may even have a race on her own because there might be some Democrats who might be looking to nominate and or vote for another for speaker. So who knows what's going to happen? But that's in the House. Now, last week I had mentioned the fact that that people are leaving Fox News in droves, and there's also been some deplatforming of conservative outlets and censoring of conservatives on social media. Well, according to Axios.com, that wall has officially been breached. Newsmax leads to the charge throughout Fox News. A new class of conservative outlets and networks is racing to capture the attention of the disgruntled Trump voters who feel abandoned by traditional news companies and censored by social media. Why it matters. Fox News for years has been criticized for polarizing coverage. Now there's a race unfolding among several conservative outlets who don't think Fox is pro-Trump enough. In the days after the election, conservative favorites like Breitbart, Drudge Report, and Real Clear Politics began to lose traffic share to Newsmax and Gateway Pundit, according to data from web analytics company SimilarWeb. Last week, Newsmax overtook Breitbart to become the most visited right-leaning news site. TV ratings for Newsmax have surged. Marquee host Greg Kelly has recently drawn as many as 1 million viewers a night. As President Trump continues to urge followers to abandon Fox News, Chris Reddy, who founded Newsmax in 1998 and took his channel to cable in 2015, told Axios that a flood of defections followed Fox News' early decision to call Arizona accurately for President-elect Biden, which infuriated Trump. It felt like it was an earthquake on election night, Reddy said during a 40-minute interview. The walls have been breached. Reddy, a member of Mar-a-Lago and Trump's golf club in West Palm Beach, said the president, his longtime friend, called him Thursday to congratulate him on the Newsmax ratings and complain about Fox News. Trump has told friends that he wants to start a direct-to-consumer digital streaming media company to take on Fox News, as Axios scooped last week. Many great alternatives are forming and exist. Try OANN and Newsmax, among others, he tweeted Sunday. OANN, One American News Network, is a tiny pro-Trump cable network that often peddles conspiracies. Fox News has led cable ratings for nearly 2 decades and continues to beat its cable rivals after the election. Especially in prime time, Fox News sees its competition as a broadcast networks. With wins in primetime since election day, between the lines, Fox News and other traditional conservative outlets face an identity crisis as they try to establish themselves for a post-Trump Washington. As a successor to its Democracy 2020 election branding, Fox News is now deploying the slogan, "Standing up for what's right" in primetime cry-ons. Now, I watched OANN from time to time. I watch Newsmax. I have my brand on many social media outlets, which I'll get to probably tomorrow or later on. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how bad things are going, and it's not just social media like Facebook and Twitter, which, by the way, Jack Dorsey of Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook were in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I only saw a little bit of it, but I might find some articles on it and present it tomorrow to you. But there were even other outlets that are doing such as well. Got this from justthenews.com, WordPress company to deplatform the blog The Conservative Treehouse for a known content violation. The Facts Insider Reporter's Notebook, the popular conservative blog The Conservative Treehouse, said Sunday that it was being removed or deplatformed by its WordPress website hosting platform. In an announcement to its readers, the blog shared that it had received the following notification. Given the incompatibility between your site's content and our terms, you need to find a new hosting provider and must migrate to the site by Wednesday, December 2nd. The site claims that it has long predicated its information on deep research and crowdsourcing work, with undeniably citations on the events we outline. Site operators also say they have never violated any terms of service, and that the WordPress company did not provide them with reason to think otherwise. The WordPress company is not explaining the reason for deplatforming because there is no justifiable reason for it, reads the blog post. At the same time, they are bold in their position. Perhaps this is the most alarming part and people should pay attention. They don't care. Treehouse says it reaches 500,000 to 1 million unique readers every day. WordPress on Monday did not immediately return a request for comment. The company's webpage says its mission is to democratize publishing one website at a time, and that open source WordPress is the most popular online publishing platform, currently powering more than a third of the web. Treehouse said it has no explanation for WordPress company's decision. Considering there is no hate speech on this website, there is no graphic, violent, foul, or abusive speech here. The content of the Treehouse is the same discussion that happens around your kitchen table or back porch discussion with friends. We would never cheapen or insult that conversation with vulgarity because that's not who we are, because that's not who our nation is. Site authors have assured readers that the blog will return in the form of CTH 2.0, a new version of the Conservative Treehouse, but have not said on which it will return. Now, not only is it Conservative Treehouse, but there are other conservative outlets, and as a matter of fact, even our good friends over at Legal Insurrection are preparing for it. They're, as is read here, prepare for the great decoupling. Deplatforming moves downstream to WordPress.com and MailChimp. This by William Jacobson. The unrelenting deplatforming pressure from the left leaves non-leftists no choice but to prepare for decoupling on our own terms. In the past day, there have been two very disturbing developments in internet deplatforming. We are all familiar with deplatforming from major social media services such as Facebook and Twitter, as well as those platforms outright silencing important news that harms Democrats, like the Biden family influence peddling scandal. Twitter regularly places notices or restrictions even on Trump's tweet on the election, or allegation that his opinions on the election were disputed. In the 4 years, Trump has been the subject of dishonest and malicious conspiracy claims, particularly Russian collusion. I can't remember Twitter ever placing such restrictions on the tweets from Madam Schiff, other Democrat politicians, or mainstream media outlets peddling that disinformation. The two recent developments take it to a new level. First, the Conservative Treehouse website says it received notification from WordPress.com that given the incompatibility between your site's content and our terms, you need to find a new hosting provider and must migrate the site by Wednesday, November 2nd. Now, WordPress.com should not be confused with the WordPress website software. WordPress.com is a hosting platform owned by Automatic. Automatic owns and operates WordPress.com, which is a hosted version of the open source WordPress software. With added features for security, speed, and support. Please append .com when referencing a product name. WordPress is open source software which is written, maintained, and supported by thousands of independent contributors worldwide. Automatic is a major contributor to the WordPress open source project. Now, Legal Insurrection uses WordPress software, but we're not hosted by WordPress.com. I have emailed Automatic asking them to confirm or deny the story as related by the Treehouse, but received no response. This form of deplatforming is particularly troubling. Long-time readers may recall that one of the main reasons we left Google Blogger, blogspot.com in 2011 was fear of being deplatformed by Google. 2.5 years later, after almost 8 million visits and 10 million page views, I'm moving away from Blogger. I made a decision even before the big Blogger blackout of 2011, but that event confirmed my view that I no longer was comfortable relying on the goodwill of Google. We are now self-hosted, but retain the fear that our host could turn out the lights on a whim, or more likely, under some sort of political pressure. We back up the website off-platform every night, and have been assured by our tech team that we would be up and running elsewhere quickly if that were to happen. But what if that elsewhere refused to take us under the same pressure? If we were a left-wing website, we would have no such worries because leftists almost never get deplatformed. At least WordPress.com gave the Treehouse notice, but the chilling effect is there. Not only do non-leftists risk deplatforming on Twitter and Facebook, now it's moved to hosting services. Second, the Northern Virginia Tea Party has been deplatformed by MailChimp, as Luke Osiak reports in a tweet that says, MailChimp, a common email delivery service, has refused to provide service to the Northern Virginia Tea Party, citing that it violates their terms of agreement against potential misinformation. It had attempted to notify members about a recount rally, and there's a pic attached to the tweet. We used to use MailChimp for our morning insurrection newsletter. We switched to Salsa Labs for reasons unrelated to MailChimp itself. Salsa Labs integrates many functions into one platform, including donations. While I was worried about being deplatformed by Google Blogger, I never even considered that an email service like MailChimp would review the content of our newsletters and refuse service because it disapproved of our opinions, as opposed to using the service for an illegal purpose. Deplatforming is moving downstream when two of the best known and largest hosting and email marketing services start censoring users who otherwise are conducting lawful business on their platforms. Non-leftists, notice I didn't say conservatives, need to prepare to decouple. The creation of Parler, funded by conservative Rebecca Mercer, has a future. We need our own platforms, and we need to decouple on our own terms. There needs to be a place to go. We're at Parler, and in 2 months have amassed over 200,000 followers. By contrast, we've been on Twitter for a decade and have been stuck at under 40,000 followers for years. We've also opened our platform at MeWe as a refuge for the day when we're deplatformed by Facebook, where our reach has stagnated and decreased in the past couple of years. Hopefully, alternative non-leftist internet platforms will continue to expand. The unrelenting pressure from the left leaves us no choice but to prepare for decoupling on our own terms. Others should prepare for the eventuality as well. So there you go. There's been a lot of stuff happening as far as deplatforming and, basic censoring by social media. But I don't know what might happen with my own blog, which I have self-hosted on my own site, but use WordPress. But I will let you know on that. I will be here on YouTube as well as other social media outlets. I'll leave them in the description below if you want to follow me there. And let me know in the comments what you think about all this deplatforming and censoring of social media. And I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter's Jack Dorsey were at the Senate yesterday, speaking before the Judiciary Committee. And there was a lot to talk about. There are a few takeaways from there, so let's get right into that. From Daily Signal, 6 takeaways as Facebook and Twitter CEOs testify at Senate hearing. The CEOs of Twitter and Facebook returned Tuesday to Capitol Hill, this time to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. While focused on Twitter's blocking of a New York Post story about the Biden family's business dealings overseas and the social media giant's immunity from lawsuit under the Communications Decency Act, the hearing veered into other topics as well. The testimony came less than a month after the two executives testified before the Senate Commerce Committee. Here are 4 major issues that emerged during the hearing as Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter's Jack Dorsey took questions from senators. Number 1, tasks and coordination. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican Missouri, one of the staunchest critics of the social media companies, said that a Facebook whistleblower had contacted his office about an internal platform called Tasks. Hawley said the whistleblower, a former Facebook employee with direct knowledge of the company's content moderation policies, explained that Facebook censorship teams use Tasks. As an exhibit, Hawley showed a task screenshot that seemed to show communication among Facebook employees and those of other tech giants. And he went, and that part goes on to say that Zuckerberg didn't give a clear answer to Hawley's question about whether Facebook coordinates its content moderation policies or if it's in anywhere with Google or Twitter. Facebook CEO first said that the companies provided warnings to each other about content regarding a terrorist attack, child exploitation imagery, or a foreign government that was creating an influence operation. And Hawley noted that earlier in the hearing, 2 Senate colleagues asked about lists of individuals, websites, and entities that have been subject to content moderation. And in response to that, Zuckerberg said, I think it would be better to follow up once I've had a chance to discuss with my team what the sensitivity around that would be. Hawley called the tech bosses the robber barons of the modern day. Number 2, publisher or platform. Early in the hearing, Twitter's Dorsey jumped on the controversy among Twitter's over Twitter's blocking of the New York Post reporting on the contents of a laptop belonging to former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Dorsey said Twitter established a policy in 2018 to prevent posting hacked material. However, after an internal interview, Twitter realized the information was not hacked and that it was a mistake to block the news story, he said. In the end, Twitter froze a Post account for 16 days over the reporting, and Senator Ted Cruz went after him with a sledgehammer, asking Dorsey if Twitter is a publisher, to which Dorsey asserted, no, we are not. We distribute information. Cruz asked, so what is a publisher? Dorsey said, any entity that is publishing under editorial guidelines and decisions. Cruz referred to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which allows digital platforms such as Twitter to avoid being sued for comments expressed by third-party users, saying, your answer happens to be contrary to the text of federal statute, particularly Section 230, which defines an information content provider as any person or entity that is responsible in whole or in part for the creation or development of information provided through the internet and or any other interactive computer service. Cruz then asked, was Twitter being a publisher when it censored the New York Post? No, Dorsey answered and said company officials believe they were following the guidelines. If there is a violation of company policy, we take enforcement action and people choose to commit to those policies and to those terms of service, he said. Except your policies are applied in a partisan and selective manner, Cruz responded. You claimed it was hacked materials, and yet you didn't block the distribution of the New York Times story that alleged to talk about the president's tax returns, even though a federal statute makes it a crime to distribute someone's tax returns without their comment or consent. To which Dorsey replied, in the New York Times case, we interpreted it as reporting about the hacked materials. And Cruz followed up by asking if Edward Snowden was blocked when he illegally released materials. When Dorsey replied he didn't know, Cruz said the answer is no. I understand you have your star chamber power, the Texas Republican added. Your position is once we silence you, we can choose to allow you to speak, but you are engaging in a publishing decision. Number 3, Dianne Feinstein seeks more aggressive censoring. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat California, the ranking member of the committee, said Twitter must do more to prevent harms caused by a tweet, saying that tweets can play a unique role in either reassuring or stirring people up to unacceptable levels. Dorsey told Feinstein that Twitter approached elections as three phases. That's leading up to election day, and the phase we are in right now, the post-election, the Twitter CEO said. So our policies and enforcement are focused on providing more information and more content to people in those 3 phases. And it goes on to say that Dorsey stuck with this company policy, saying, I do believe that connecting people to the larger situation to bring them more context is the right path here. Number 4, Twitter and voter fraud. Cruz asked, Mr. Dorsey, does voter fraud exist? Dorsey responded, I don't know for certain. Cruz inquired, why then is Twitter not putting purported warnings on voter fraud? Dorsey said that link is pointing to a broader conversation with tweets from publishers and people all around the country. Cruz then went on to lure Dorsey into responses on the subject. And you can see it all right here. Number 5, Lee said distinctly partisan. Senator Mike Lee, Republican Utah, said that what the social media bosses called mistakes always seem to happen on one side for digital platforms such as Twitter and Facebook that claim to be nonpartisan. There are instances in which you are taking a very distinctively partisan approach and not a neutral one to election-related content moderation, Lee said. Lee noted that Twitter suspended Mark Morgan, the chief of Customs and Border Protection, for tweeting about the border wall. Facebook pulled conservative ads, he said. Dorsey said we evaluated his tweet. That was a mistake. Zuckerberg said Facebook restored the ad after further review. And number 6, Blumenthal on Bannon. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, Connecticut, brought up a November 5 Facebook Live event featuring former Breitbart executive and Trump political advisor Steve Bannon that referred to quote-unquote beheadings of Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and FBI Director Christopher Wray, an over-the-top reference to firings that Bannon recommended. Facebook removed the post but didn't ban Bannon. Blumenthal asked how many times is Steve Bannon allowed to call for the murder of government officials before Facebook suspends his account. Zuckerberg responded the content in question did violate our policies and we took it down. Having a content violation does not automatically mean your account gets taken down, and the number of strikes varies depending on the type of offense, he said. Blumenthal asked, will you commit to taking down that account, Steve Bannon's account? Zuckerberg responded, Senator, no, that's not what our policy suggests we do in this case. And there you have it. Should be interesting to see what Facebook and Twitter do in the interim after this. And yeah, I mean, you know, there are so many these social media accounts. Like I said, I'm on many of them, and as a matter of fact, if I can go to as a matter of fact, let's just pull up, because I have my social media on my page here, and you can see my social media accounts. I do have a Facebook profile and fan page. I'm also on Quora, Twitter, Tumblr, MeWe, Gab, Parler, USA Life, You're Free, Here We Go, Wimkin. I also have I also have video outlets on YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion, Vimeo, Twitch, DLive, and Rio, Metacalf, and brand new Tube. I also have an audio on Spreaker, which I might get to soonish, and I also have a Gilded server as well. So, yeah, I mean, you know, there are just so many so many social media platforms that it doesn't hurt to spread your brand around. You know, show some of those small people some of. I mean, I know that Parler, MeWe, and Gab are really starting to pump up because of all this that's happening with Facebook and Twitter. So yeah, you know, just look into that. And going based on yesterday, we have Twitter CEO's shocking excuse for allowing New York Post on Biden while allowing New York Times' Trump tax returns. This from Tyler O'Neill from PJ Media. Senator Ted Cruz took Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey to task over his company suppression of the bombshell New York Post report on Hunter Biden's emails linking Joe Biden to his son's notorious business deals. In a Senate hearing on Tuesday, Cruz pressed Dorsey on how Twitter could possibly claim not to be a publisher when they selectively edited or applied its hacked materials policy against the Biden story, but not against the New York Times article on Trump's tax returns. The Post story broke in the lead up to the 2020 election, and a Newsbuster survey suggested that the legacy media and big tech's efforts to suppress the story about Biden corruption may have made the crucial difference in the election. A small but insignificant portion of Americans who voted for Biden and did not hear about the corruption stories said they would not have voted for the Democrat had they known. Cruz argued that the immunity platforms like Twitter enjoy under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is, in effect, a subsidy, a form of corporate welfare for some of the most influential companies on the planet. Under Section 230, companies like Twitter are not held liable for the content others publish on their platforms. Section 230 gives the companies the ability to curate content to some extent on the premise that they're not acting as publishers. Cruz asked Dorsey, is Twitter a publisher? The Twitter CEO insisted, no, we are not. The senator cited the definition of publisher under Section 230, any person or entity that is responsible in whole or in part for the creation or development of information provided through the internet. Cruz then pressed Dorsey on Twitter's decision to censor the New York Post. Was Twitter being a publisher when it censored the New York Post? The senator asked. No, Dorsey replied, we have very clear policies on the conduct we enable on the platform, and if there's a violation, we take enforcement action, and people choose to commit to those policies and to those terms of service. Cruz countered that Twitter's policies were applied in a partisan and selective manner. You claimed the New York Post story was hacked materials, and yet you didn't block the distribution of the New York Times story that alleged about President Trump's tax returns. Even though a federal statute makes it a crime to distribute someone's tax returns without their consent, you didn't block any of that, did you? Dorsey admitted that Twitter did not block that discussion. Instead, he split hairs trying to justify the double standard. In the New York Times case, we interpreted it as reporting about the hack materials, not distribution of the hack materials, he said. Cruz also noted that Twitter locked the account of Jake Sherman, a reporter with Politico, when he shared the New York Times story, even though Sherman argued he was asking questions to undermine the story. When Twitter is editing and censoring and silencing the New York Post, the newspaper with the fourth highest circulation in the country, and Politico, one of the leading newspapers in the country, is Twitter acting as a publisher when it's deciding which stories reporters are allowed to write and publish and which stories they're not, Cruz demanded. Dorsey countered by insisting that Sherman's account was not suspended, only quote-unquote locked. It fell afoul of the hack materials policy. We realized that there was an error in that policy and the enforcement, the CEO admitted. Cruz also noted that Twitter did not block the Edward Snowden documents. The senator also pressed Dorsey on his company's labels on election fraud claims. Mr. Dorsey, does voter fraud exist? Cruz asked. I don't know for certain, Dorsey admitted. Are you an expert in voter fraud? No, I am not, the CEO said. Why then is Twitter right now putting purported warnings on virtually any statement about voter fraud? Cruz demanded. We're simply linking to a broader conversation so that people have more information, Dorsey insisted. Cruz rightly countered that Twitter's labels do not, quote-unquote, link to a broader conversation. Instead, they insist that voter fraud of any kind is exceedingly rare in the United States. Dorsey admitted that Twitter would put, quote-unquote, disputed information flags under quotes from the Carter-Baker Commission on federal election reform. So Twitter's position is essentially voter fraud does not exist, Cruz argued. Yet, just 2 weeks ago in the state of Texas, a woman was charged with 134 counts of voter fraud. Cruz concluded his remarks by demanding that Facebook and Twitter provide a list of the times they have blocked Republican and Democrat candidates for office and sitting office holders in the 2016, 2018, and 2020 election cycles. Both Dorsey and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg gave half-hearted pledges to work on compiling such a list. Facebook and Twitter and Google have massive power. They have a monopoly on public discourse in the online arena, Cruz argued. Yet, consistently, the message from the Senate Democrats is for Facebook and Twitter and Google to censor more, to abuse their power more, to silence voices that Senate Democrats disagree with more. It is very dangerous if we want to maintain a free and fair democracy, if we want to maintain free speech, he lamented. There was a time when Democrats embraced and defended the principles of free speech. There was a time when Democrats embrace and defend the principles of a free press. And yet there's an absolute silence from Democrats speaking up for the press outlets censored by big tech. There's an absolute silence from Democrats speaking up for the citizens silenced by big tech. Instead, there's a demand to use even more power to silence dissent, and that's a totalitarian instinct that I think is very dangerous, Cruz warned. Indeed, this weekend, former President Barack Obama called for even more big tech fact-checking, suggesting that the 71 million Americans who voted for Trump were all taken in by misinformation. And that from PJ Media. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, if the big tech is going to be streamlined or something like that, which happened with the telephones, AT&T back I believe in the 80s. I think I had heard somewhere. I'll have to look into that, but yeah. Meanwhile, overall, right across the Capitol and the House, both Democrats and Republicans are busy electing their leadership. And yes, Nancy Pelosi is nominated as Speaker of the House. And actually, this is rather surprising. This from Roll Call. Pelosi affirms a promise that the next term as Speaker will be her last. I don't want to undermine any leverage I might have, but I made a statement. Pelosi says affirming term limit commitment. Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Wednesday reaffirmed the pledge she made to House Democrats 2 years ago that she would give up the gavel after the 117th Congress. Ahead of the 116th Congress, Pelosi cut a deal with a handful of members threatening to vote against her for Speaker on the floor. To win their support, the California Democrat agreed to allow the caucus to vote on proposed term limits for the top 3 Democrat leaders and to abide by the proposal herself, regardless of whether it was adopted. The term limit plan, which would have limited the top 3 leaders from serving beyond the 117th Congress, was not brought before the caucus as scheduled amid a partial government shutdown. The members pushing for the proposal agreed to drop it indefinitely, but noted they could always bring it up again if needed. In the nearly 2 years since Pelosi cut that deal, she's declined to answer questions about whether she'd uphold her commitment to give up the Speaker's gavel after the 117th Congress. But at a news conference Wednesday, shortly after the Democrat caucus nominated her to serve as Speaker again, Pelosi answered the question. Her response wasn't direct, but it revealed her intention to keep her promise from 2 years prior. What I said then is whether it passes or not, I will abide by those limits that are there, Pelosi said. If my husband is listening, don't let me have to be more specific than that because we never expected to have another term now, she added. I consider this a gift and I can't wait to be working with Joe Biden and preparing us for a transition into the future. Pelosi said after the 2016 election that she had planned to retire if Hillary Clinton had won the presidency, but she decided to stay on to ensure there'd be women at the leadership table with President Trump and male congressional leaders. In 2018, before she cut the term limit deal, Pelosi had been reticent to pinpoint how long she would stay on, noting that she didn't want to make herself a lame duck. That's why she hadn't talked about it even after agreeing to the term limits for herself. And my on Wednesday, she avoided saying directly that her next term would be her last. I don't want to undermine any leverage I may have, but I made a statement, Pelosi said. Some members had wanted Pelosi to reaffirm her or to affirm her commitment to the term limits, and doing so probably helps her heading into a January 4 vote, in which she can afford more than a handful of defections. Democrats will have a single-digit majority. The specific number will be determined by the outcomes of uncalled House races, and at least 10 of the Democrats who voted against Pelosi 2 years ago are returning to Congress. House Majority Leader Sidney Hoyer and Majority Whip James Clyburn opposed the term limit proposal and never agreed to abide by it. Now, it's unclear if they plan to try to succeed Pelosi after she leaves, although Clyburn has previously indicated he no longer aspires to be Speaker. House Democratic Caucus Chairman Hakeem Jeffries and newly elected Assistant Speaker Kathleen M. Clark are considered potential successors to Pelosi. Now, she was already, now, she is elected by the Democrats for now, but come January 3rd, it'll be interesting to see if she holds on to that, or if those, or if the aforementioned 10 who are returning to the Congress will continue to vote against Pelosi 2 years ago. But and we have the top three in the House GOP are going to remain the same. This also from roll call. McCarthy, Scalise, and Cheney re-elected as top trio in House GOP, with Hudson and Johnson joining the leadership ranks. After gaining significant ground and flipping several Democrat seats in the 2020 elections, House Republicans have chosen to reward their top three leaders with another 2 years at the helm of the conference. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Minority Whip Steve Scalise, and Republican Conference Chairwoman Liz Cheney will all keep their positions and lead their conference in the 117th Congress. McCarthy, who would likely be Speaker if his party won back the majority in 2022, was elected unanimously. Speaking afterward on Tuesday, the California Republican sounded an optimistic note. I think our numbers are going to be well on the way to over 210. It's going to be an exciting next 2 years, but we have work to get done this time as well, he said. McCarthy said he still wants to wait for all legal votes to be counted, but is now entertaining what his role would be in a Biden presidency. We'll work with anybody who is in that office, but if they have a difference of opinion, we're going to have to find common ground. We're not for socialism. We're not for higher taxes. We will fight every step of the way. Asked about how the GOP will move on once Donald Trump leaves office, he said, the president, regardless of whether he's president again or he's citizen Trump, I think he will continue to play a part in this nation. Minnesota Representative Tom Emmer will retain his role as chairman of the House's GOP campaign arm, the National Republican Congressional Committee, and Alabama Representative Gary Palmer will reprise his role as Republican Policy Committee chairman. 2 leadership positions were open, conference chair and secretary, due to North Carolina Representative Mark Walker's retirement and Missouri Representative Jason Smith's decision to seek the ranking member spot on the Budget Committee. Louisiana's Mike Johnson, currently chairman of the Republican Study Committee, will be the conference's next vice chairman, and North Carolina's Richard Hudson will be its next secretary. I'm honored to have the trust of my colleagues, and I'm really excited about the prospects for the next 2 years because we have a hopeful agenda for the American people, Hudson said. The announcements were made Tuesday from the House Republicans' Twitter account. McCarthy touted the GOP's success last week, noting that not one incumbent Republican lost, and that the Democrats' performance will result in the slimmest House majority in decades. Representative Mike Garcia, Republican California, is currently narrowly ahead in a race that has not yet been called. McCarthy also commended the diversity of the GOP candidates who won, calling it the most diverse class and alluding to it as a year of Republican women. We are poised to have 29 House Republican women join our ranks, surpassing the previous record, he said on November 12. Despite this rise in female GOP lawmakers, 6 of the top 7 posts in the House GOP leadership will be held by men, the same number as the 116th Congress. Scalise will serve his 4th consecutive term as whip and said he is excited for the future of the party. Our Republican conference is stronger and more united than ever, and I'm energized to work with this large and diverse new freshman class to continue the fight for our shared conservative values, he said in a statement. Now, it'll definitely be an interesting 2 years, whether Pelosi remains speaker or even whether, the Republicans regain control, or even if there is a Republican speaker and a Democrat majority. I mean, who knows what might happen come January 3rd, or actually probably January 4th. because the third is on January 4th, because the third is on a Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see what'll happen when the new Congress is gavelled in. And let me know in the comments what you think on that. And I'll see you and I will definitely talk to you in the next video. The election was 16 days ago, and believe it or not, there is infighting among the Democrat Party, in particular among Florida Democrats. Got this from the Washington Free Beacon. Election losses spark conflict among Florida Democrats. While congressional Democrats have downplayed party infighting, Democrat state lawmakers in Florida told Politico that significant election day losses have sparked divisions within the party's moderates and progressives. November's election dealt a blow to Democrats in the Sunshine State, where Republicans split 5 seats in the State House and unseated Representatives Debbie Powell and Donna Shalala. Now, Democrat state lawmakers erupted over the results in a November 4th phone call. Politico reported Wednesday. State officials who joined the call noted several problems within their party, including messaging, which highlights a growing chasm between centrist and leftist Democrats in the state. Florida State Senator Jason Pizzo, Democrat, one of the lawmakers on the call, expressed frustration with Republican messaging, which targeted Latino voters in Florida by focusing on left-wing Democrats' embrace of socialism. I'm not a fracking socialist, Pizzo told Politico. My life is a manifestation of the American dream. I believe in free markets. Former Democrat Florida State Representative Sean Shaw said everything went wrong for Democrats this election. We have turnout problems, messaging problems, coalitions problems. It's up and down the board. Shaw, who also ran a failed campaign for state attorney general in 2018, said, "It's not one thing that went wrong. Everything went wrong." Now, while leftist state lawmakers have called for systematic change, more moderate Democrats acknowledge Florida is a right-leaning state and they must be quote-unquote smart if they want them in statewide offices in 2022. Only one Democrat, Agricultural Commissioner Nikki Fried, holds a statewide office. In Washington, congressional Democrats pointed fingers at one another in another chaotic post-election call on November 5th. On the call, Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger blamed leftist Democrats, anti-police, and socialist messaging for her near loss on election day. The quote-unquote squad, a quartet of progressive House Democrats, has led the party's march to the left since taking office in 2019, but Democrats have largely dismissed the squabbles. Democrat Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota said the party was just one big family in an interview addressing Democrat infighting on Sunday. Earlier this week, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont said he did not know any Democrat candidates who backed left-wing efforts to defund the police. And last week, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat New York, said she was not aware of any Democrats who campaign on socialism. Now, both Omar and Ocasio-Cortez have backed efforts to defund police departments this year. Lance Morris, National Press Secretary for the Republican State Leadership Committee, told the Washington Free Beacon that socialist messaging led to Democrats' demise this election despite record-breaking campaign spending. National Democrats and radical groups spent millions to elect Democrats who ran on socialist agendas, and it resulted in a colossal failure for Democrats up and down the ballot, Morris said. It's clear that socialism was a loser in this year's elections, and Florida sang that song the loudest. And that's true. I mean, you look at every single at every single race that the Democrats had, and a good chunk of it was lost due to their socialistic policies. And yeah, so we have that, and in other news, we have the we have post-election litigation raging still in multiple battleground states with lawyers representing Donald Trump, including big and small names. Got this from the Daily Signal. It's a long article. The link is in the description below, but so I'll mention just a couple of them. The article will be in the description below, like I said. Here are 8 lawyers in the thick of Trump's election fight. Several lawyers withdrew after reporting pressure from anti-Trump activists that included posting the lawyers' names and contact info on social media. Twitter removed such information posted on this platform. Of the lawyers who remain, some are litigating in court while others largely play a media role. Here are 8 of them. Justin Clark, interestingly enough, began a career in politics, working for one of the last 2 candidates, a Democrat caught up in a contested presidential election. Then Vice President Al Gore. Clark did accounting work for Gore's 2000 presidential campaign, NPR reported. On his path to taking the role of deputy campaign manager and senior counsel on the Trump 2020 election campaign. And it goes on to say that Clark later evolved as a Republican, and in 2010 and 2014, he managed the unsuccessful Connecticut gubernatorial campaigns of GOP nominee Tom Foley. And Trump transitioned to the re-election campaign in May 2018. Number 2 is Mark Scaringi, a lawyer in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He is leading the Trump campaign's legal effort in that state. Scaringi worked on Representative Rick Santorum's campaign for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. And after Santorum won in 1994, Scaringi became his legislative correspondent in Washington. And he was a delegate to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. And it goes on to say that he received his law degree from Widener University, Delaware Law School in 2001. Another lawyer is Jesse Bennell, who said Donald Trump won after you account for the fraud and irregularities that occurred. And he is representing the Trump campaign in Nevada. He is a partner at Harvey and Bennell PLLC and president of Parliamentary Strategies, which the law firm owns. The company provides clients such as professional associations, political parties, candidates with procedures for meetings, bylaw drafting, and interpretation. And now one of the big guns here is Sidney Powell, who made news recently by calling out potential problems with voting machines made by Dominion voting systems and suggesting that enough evidence will emerge to overturn election results in several states. Powell became a public figure by representing Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. And it goes on to say that Powell is now a defense attorney who practices federal appeals cases in the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 9th, 10th, and 11th circuits, as well as before the Supreme Court, according to her website. She represented Merrill Lynch executives in the Enron litigation. And she became an outspoken critic of the Justice Department, writing the book License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, which was published in 2014. Another low-profile lawyer is William Conservative, who has had experience arguing before the Supreme Court, and he represented Trump in recent New York State court cases, where he works primarily on appellate cases, and he has been involved in cases on constitutional issues, interpretation and enforcement of federal statutes, administrative law, civil rights disputes, among others. 2 recent cases he argued before the Supreme Court were Spokio Incorporated versus Robbins and Evanwell versus Abbott. He's a former law clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas. And he clerked for Judge Jones of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 5th Circuit and for the 7th Judicial Circuit of Virginia. Now here is what I call the murderer's row of lawyers. You have Pam Bondi, former two-term Florida Attorney General, elected in 2010 and again in 2014. She's already familiar to viewers of Fox News Channel, and she became a familiar figure early in 2020 as one of Trump's lawyers during his Senate impeachment trial. She's made strong arguments for the president on the Senate floor, but is largely a spokesperson for legal arguments, according to the Washington Post. And as Florida Attorney General, she was one of the key Republican state attorneys generals who sued to overturn the Affordable Care Act. The Supreme Court held the law in 2012. Also, as Florida Attorney General, Bondi filed litigation as part of the national opioid crisis. And she's had a legal fight in the national mortgage settlement case and sued BP over the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, settling for more than $2 billion with the B dollars in economic relief in Florida. Another heavy hitter is Rudy Giuliani, who has become a controversial figure as Trump's personal lawyer and a central player in the impeachment controversy because of his investigations in Ukraine. That's a significant change from Giuliani's status as national hero, as New York mayor during the 9/11 terror attacks, adding to a reputation as a tough on crime executive and prosecutor. And he primarily serves the president as the media spokesman rather than as a litigator, according to the Washington Post. Before serving as mayor, though, he had a distinguished legal career as a federal prosecutor. And it goes on to say that in 1983, Reagan appointed Giuliani as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. In this role, he gained national prominence for taking on drug dealers and the mafia, scoring 4,152 convictions, of which only 25 were reversed on appeal. And we have Jay Sekulow, who became a prominent public face in defending Trump as his personal lawyer during special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation and during the Senate impeachment trial. Sekulow is chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, a conservative legal group. He has argued 12 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, many of them religious liberty cases. One case was about allowing public school students to voluntarily belong to Bible clubs in school. And most recently in the case, Pleasant Grove City versus Summum, he won a unanimous ruling from the High Court to allow governments to accept permanent monuments, such as the Ten Commandments monuments in public parks. And yeah, so Time Magazine put him on its list of the 25 most influential evangelicals. So there you have it, the big time murderer's row of attorneys that the president has. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, but all of this is just a part of the unending election cycle, which we have this coming from National Review. Another long one, the link will be in the comments below. There's a Groundhog Day effect to the news today as once again the nation's attention returns to the Wayne City, Michigan Board of Canvassers, where the board's two Republicans now want to undo their certification from Tuesday night. Elsewhere, the odds of any court delaying or reversing the certification of a state's vote tallies are slim to none, and the president is uncharacteristically and suddenly camera shy. And it goes on to say that I'm not sure there's a legal mechanism for the two members to withdraw or undo a certification by themselves, although a judge could conceivably order just about anything if he concluded that election results were fraudulent. On Monday, the Michigan Court of Appeals rejected a request to delay the certification of the county's votes, and the lawyer for that case is hoping the Michigan Supreme Court will accept his appeal, but as noted yesterday, even if the county board had stalemated or been able to certify the results, the whole matter would automatically be transferred to the State Board of Canvassers to evaluate for themselves. Then under Michigan law, Board of County Canvassers shall immediately deliver to the Secretary of the Board of State Canvassers all records and other information pertaining to the election. The Board of State Canvassers shall meet immediately and make the necessary determinations and certify the results within the 10 days immediately following the receipt of records from the Board of County Canvassers. And it says right about now, someone may be exclaiming that a district GOP chairman should not be serving on the state board of canvassers. Every canvassing board in the state consists of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. The other 3 members of the state board are a staff attorney from the Republicans in the state house, and a former assistant prosecutor, the recording secretary of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 58, and former vice president of the Metro Detroit AFL-CIO, and a retired political coordinator for the American Federation of Teachers in Michigan. Now, back during the Florida recount in 2020, some people argued that people with strong political affiliations or views should not serve in roles overseeing and running elections. However, the problem is that people with because the problem is that people with strong political affiliations or views are often the only ones interested in doing the work required to oversee and run elections. And there was a thing that on November 26th, Florida State Secretary of State Kathleen Harris certified that Bush had won the election by a 531 vote margin. Gore then sued Harris because of all of the recounts had not been completed when she certified the results. On December 8, 2000, Florida Supreme Court sided with Gore, ordering that all statewide undervote ballots or punch card ballots that had been cast but not registered because of a problem called a hanging chad need to be recounted. Supreme Court subsequently ruled 7-2 that there was no legal or existing legal standard to recount the punch card ballots, and ruled 5-4 that any solution to the recount problem couldn't be put in place by December 12, the safe harbor deadline. Knows the distinction which most Democrats prefer not to remember, as it means Justices Stephen Breyer and David Souter agreed that the Bush campaign had a legitimate argument about only recounting the groups of ballots most advantageous to Gore. The U.S. Supreme Court decision meant that the original certification by Kathleen Harris remained in place. So yes, the Supreme Court reversed the certification for a couple of days. Then it reverted back to the original. And if you've been paying attention, you've seen that up to this point, judges have been really unimpressed and unconvinced by what the Trump campaign lawyers have brought to court. Furthermore, there is an exceptionally high bar to invalidating a vote, and no judge is going to throw out a vote based on an argument that might be fraudulent. And it says that the Electoral College formally votes on December 14. Federal law includes a safe harbor deadline that basically declares that the candidate who is deemed the winner 6 days before the Electoral College meets is considered the winner. So the real deadline is December 8. Now we have, since President Trump delivered his remarks at 2:20 a.m. the Wednesday after Election Day, he's barely been in front of the cameras, participating in Veterans Day events, and he held the briefing about Operation Warp Speed on Friday, November 13. Other than that, he has had no public events scheduled. Election Day was 16 days ago. And there's an addendum. In addition to President-elect Joe Biden's picks for Treasury Secretary and Attorney General, the other big indicator of how his presidency will proceed is his election for Secretary of State. Now, your mileage may vary, but Delaware Senator Chris Coons would be fine. William Burns would be a pleasant surprise. Tony Blinken would be okay, and Isaac Shore is right. Susan Rice would be the most ominous selection. And now this article mentions that the Electoral College formally votes on December 14. Many Democrats want to eliminate the Electoral College. However, here is a reason as to why it is still good for the United States. This coming from the Federalist. If former Vice President Joe Biden prevails in the 2020 election by securing a victory in both the electoral and popular vote tallies, it will not curtail the clamoring nor the movement to send the Electoral College to a crematorium. The Washington Post Electoral Board, for example, recently renewed its call to abolish it. Abolishing the Electoral College would be a disaster for freedom and the constitutional imperative to prevent the concentration and abuse of power. It would likely open the door to greater election result paralysis, as well as more voter fraud by big state and city machine politics. The founders designed the Electoral College to moderate the influence of large states and big cities over small states and rural districts. Rhode Island, for example, with re-electoral votes would hardly matter if the presidency were decided strictly by a national popular vote. Presidential candidates could and would ignore states like Rhode Island and focus on states and districts with large population centers, offering more bang for effort and dollars. Small state electoral votes have often affected the national outcome. Eliminate the Electoral College, and the price of voters in small states all but disappears in the presidential election. Equally important, a direct popular vote would further erode the power of the states in maintaining the intended constitutional balance between the national and state governments. The dispersion of power between the states, especially in relation to the federal government, is among the greatest protections against a concentrated national tyranny. The states form the lifeblood of freedom and democracy. 50 states engaged in a hothouse of democratic experimentation and exploration for creative political solutions have benefited America throughout her history. Ending slavery, impossible at the founding on a national basis, began as a state movement. Likewise, states pioneered reforms and strengthened rights in a multitude of areas, including civil liberties, voting, religious freedom, property rights, equality of opportunity, and many others. America can currently tolerate a socialism-friendly Vermont rate alongside a no income tax policy such as New Hampshire, because the U.S. system does not promote nor demand cookie-cutter states. Abolishing the Electoral College threatens the voices, survivability, and creative freedom of all states. All Americans benefit from a greater diversity of thought, action, and opportunities. If you don't like the politics, economics, and cultural atmosphere of one state, you can move to another. Sidebar on this, I had a co-host when I had a radio show called Red, Red, and Blue. She always said, vote with your feet. So this is one way to vote with your feet. Anyway, back to the article. The Electoral College protects that diversity and ensures that all voters matter, just not those who reside in urban areas or states. The Electoral College also stands for the concentration of power and the potential for voter abuse. The Electoral College also stands against the concentration of power and the potential for voter abuse, witnessed where potential voter fraud has emerged in the current election. Fortunately, the potential litigation is only concentrated in a few states and big cities with possible voting irregularities. Most of the 2020 results across the country are complete. If you abolish the Electoral College, America could face strangulating litigation in every state in the Union, as victory would ride only on the national vote. We'd all like clean, quick, and decisive election results, yet patience should be in greater demand. Getting elections as close to correct as possible is essential to democracy. It's also important that the election system minimize the potential for corruption, demagoguery, and especially a concentration of power that invites tyranny. The Electoral College preserves the constitutional checks and balances to power that the founders in their wisdom intended. Every 4 years and across time, the college provides a valuable countrywide, state-by-state snapshot of the trends and diversity in political thought. Much of this rich checkerboard of American politics would be lost in presidential elections based purely on a popular vote. Whatever the outcome of the 2020 presidential election or future contests, the Electoral College provides a potential challenge to either party, claiming a clear mandate by a myopic focus on the national popular vote. The short-sighted ignorance represented by the movement to abolish or circumvent the Electoral College and constitutional limits will not enhance voter rights, but it will open the door to greater abuse, fraud, and tyranny by the majority. And that's the end of the article, but yeah, I mean, you know, for Tara Voss, she is a constitutional historian or attorney, and she did 2 wonderful videos on for PragerU on the Electoral College. I highly recommend you read them. I'll find them, and if I do, I'll drop them in the comments, or I'll drop them in the description below. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's just one completely unending election cycle, and I'll be here bringing everything to you as it happens. Litigation is still ongoing, even though Georgia had certified the electoral results. And there are 6 big claims by Trump's lawyers about overturning the election results. This from my good friends at the Daily Signal. President Donald Trump's campaign legal team on Thursday released new affidavits alleging election irregularities, while also making serious accusations of nationally coordinated fraud by local election officials to obscure a Trump landslide. The press conference, led by former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani and held at Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, went well over 90 minutes and proved it to be as fiery as it was lengthy. President Trump won by a landslide. We're going to prove it. Trump campaign lawyer Sidney Powell, a former federal prosecutor, said at one point. The legal team said it will present evidence in new court cases, asking judges for restraining orders and temporary injunctions to block certification of the election results in several close battleground states where former Vice President Joe Biden currently leads Trump. Time is critical as states have until December 8th to certify their vote in the presidential race, and the Electoral College will meet December 14th to elect a president. Here are key highlights from the lawyers' press conference. Enough to overturn election number 1. The most significant claim made by Giuliani was that affidavits obtained by the president's legal team will provide enough evidence to overturn the election. Major media outlets called the election for Biden on November 7, saying he was projected to win more than the necessary 270 votes in the Electoral College. The former mayor said the fraud was clear in Democrat-run cities in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Giuliani went on to say that they have more than double the number of votes needed to overturn the election in terms of provable illegal ballots. You know, look at what's alleged, look at the affidavits. Maybe we can supply more affidavits in order to do it. I have to get permission from the people. Goes on to say Trump's legal team has said that it has 220 sworn affidavits from residents across multiple states, the ones made public are from residents of Pennsylvania and Michigan. However, all the affidavits would be part of the court record. And Giuliani said that as many as 100,000 absentee ballots should have been disqualified in Wisconsin, a number that easily could have given the state to Trump. Trump also should have carried Pennsylvania by 300,000 votes, he said. Number 2, Trump won by a landslide. Powell described the problems with Dominion voting systems, a manufacturer of voting machines, and what she said were the company's ties to the socialist government of Pennsylvania. Powell said that this is stunning, heartbreaking, infuriating, and the most unpatriotic act I can ever imagine for the people in this country that participated in. And she added, I want the American public to know right now, we will not be intimidated. We are not going to be intimidated. We're not going to back down. We're going to clean this mess up. And we're going to prove that President Trump won by a landslide. Powell alleged the massive influence of communist money from Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China to interfere in the U.S. election. She added that no one should want a coordination of a president under these suspect circumstances. And there were lawsuits in the Philippines ensued over glitches and allegations of fraud in the 2010 election over there. An independent review of source codes using the machines found numerous problems, saying the software inventory provided by Smartmatic is inadequate, which brings into question the software credibility. Smartmatic's chairman, Mark Malloch Brown, is a member of the British House of Lords. He is also a member of the global board of the Soros-founded Open Societies Foundations, the Associated Press reported. And in response to a request for comment from the Daily Signal, Dominion referred to information from a press release it issued earlier this week. There have been no raids of Dominion servers by the U.S. military or otherwise, and Dominion does not have servers in Germany, the release says. And it says number 3 is Biden's Freudian slip. Giuliani noted the danger of mail-in voting has been cited by such liberal sources as former President Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, former Supreme Court Justice David Souter, and the New York Times. This is the first time we did it en masse, and I think we've proven that all three are prophets. Giuliani said of voting by mail, it's not only susceptible to fraud, it is easily susceptible to fraud, particularly if you had a plan or a scheme that sounds eerily similar to what Joe Biden told us a few days before the election, that he had the best voter fraud team in the world. In late October, Biden said, we have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. Biden defenders contend that the Democrat presidential nominee was talking about a voter protection program in his campaign, and that he misspoke. Giuliani joked that it was a Freudian slip and speculated that Biden was likely part of the fraud. He later backed away, saying he wasn't sure what Biden is or is not aware of. The former mayor suggested Biden's assertion about the most extensive such operation in American history could have been an overstatement. Well, they were good, Giuliani said. I don't know what they were. I don't know that they were that good because they made significant mistakes like all crooks do, and we caught them. Number 4, electoral security mechanism. Jenna Ellis, the Trump campaign's senior legal advisor, noted that based on the alleged conduct by election officials in cities such as Detroit and Philadelphia, voter fraud might not be the best term. When we talk about voter fraud, it's actually election official fraud, Ellis said. That cannot stand. The Constitution requires that the state legislatures are the ones that make the election law. What has happened in this case is that state and local level officials and all the way up have changed the rules. They want to tear down the American system. Ellis referred to Federalist 68, the founding document in which Alexander Hamilton explained the need for the Electoral College to prevent election of a president through corrupt means. The founders were so brilliant that they anticipated this, that there would be corruption, that there would be foreign influence, there would be attempts to manipulate the outcome of the election, especially with who they called our chief magistrate. We select our president through the Electoral College not because it disenfranchises voters, but because it is a safety mechanism for the exact type of corruption that we are uncovering. A reporter asked, is the country on the verge of an electoral breakdown? Powell responded, we already had it. She provided some assurance that it's not over, though. We have already had that electoral breakdown, but the Constitution, as Jenna explains, has provisions in it for how you fix it. Powell said, referring to Ellis's comment about the Electoral College. Number 5, quoting my cousin Vinny. In describing how Republican election observers in some cities were kept at too far a distance to watch the ballot counting, Giuliani referred to the 1992 film comedy My Cousin Vinny, starring Joe Pesci as a hapless New York lawyer. Did you all watch My Cousin Vinny? You know the movie? It's one of my favorite law movies because Vinny comes from Brooklyn, Giuliani said. The former mayor held up 2 fingers. When the nice lady says what she saw, and he says to her, how many fingers do I got up? She says 3, while she was so far away to see there was only 2. Giuliani used a movie scene to capture the situation for election observers who have the legal right to watch the counting process for mail-in ballots. These people were no further away than my cousin Vinny was away from the witness. They couldn't see a thing, Giuliani said, adding, now I don't know, are you going to tell me that 60 people are lying? They didn't just tell me this, they swore under penalty of perjury, which is something no Democrat has ever done. You don't ask Biden about this, put him under penalty of perjury. He didn't even get asked questions about it. He doesn't get asked questions about all the evidence of crimes he committed. These people are under penalty of perjury. Their names are on an affidavit. The article and that section goes on to say that beyond the issues raised by the Trump campaign's legal team, many references on social media to Giuliani were not only about his movie reference, but what appeared to be dark-haired eyes that ran down his face in two streams as he perspired during the press conference. Number 6, scolding fake news. Ellis aggressively went after reporters covering the press conference, accusing them of biased coverage and not understanding how legal proceedings work. More evidence will come forward in court, she said, and the team's presentation was only like an opening statement. We go through a jury process. This is a court of public opinion right now, Ellis said, adding, we are not trying our case in the court of public opinion because if we were, we would get unbiased jurors. I would strike 99% of you from the jury, and I would be allowed to because of the fake news coverage you provide. You're not unbiased jurors. She predicted that coverage of the press conference by the mainstream media would be dismissive, but said that reporters' opinions don't matter. The facts matter, the truth matters. If you are fair reporters, you will cover that fairly and appropriately and will allow coverage for a media team and a legal team. I can see you taking pictures and can anticipate what your headlines are going to be. If you're not willing to talk about the evidence that's being presented, then that is absolutely unacceptable for journalistic standards. Jenna Ellis is so correct there. I mean, and that's why I like Andrew Breitbart so much, because the media nowadays puts forth opinion as fact and truth, and that's why Andrew Breitbart said the new media is taking over where the old media failed. And yes, they did fail. And speaking of Sidney Powell, she got this from the Epoch Times, where it says Trump lawyer Sidney Powell says team will sue officials to invalidate election results. Hours after claiming that President Donald Trump won the election by a landslide and then that there is evidence to overturn it, campaign lawyer Sidney Powell said her team will sue more election officials in key states. While the campaign will not sue election software manufacturing companies, the suits will be against the election officials to invalidate the results of the election and force it to the legislatures and the Electoral College and then the Congress if necessary, said Powell, a former federal prosecutor who successfully defended General McCarthy in court. In an interview with Fox Business's Lou Dobbs, Powell was likely referring to Article 1, Article 2, and the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution about contested or contingent elections. Some legal expert and Congress members, including Howard Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz and Representative Mo Brooks, Republican Alabama, have suggested that Congress can reject the state's electoral college votes. Some state senates or assemblies or houses can vote to send up their own slate of electors from when the electoral college meets in November. The entire election, frankly, in all the swing states should be overturned, and the legislators should make sure that the electors are selected for Trump, she told Dobbs. It's going to have to follow the constitutional provisions. Powell did not say what officials will be sued. Earlier Thursday, Powell transcribed an alleged transnational conspiracy using quote-unquote communist money from Cuba, Venezuela, and possibly China to overturn the election. And the article goes on to say that Powell in the news conference brought up alleged connections between Smartmatic, Dominion voting systems, and Venezuela's regime under long-dead strongman Hugo Chavez. She made reference to an affidavit filed this week that cited testimony from an alleged whistleblower and former Venezuelan military member who claimed Smartmatic, Dominion, and other election software companies use technology that was developed in Venezuela under Chavez years ago. Over the years, Venezuela's government has been accused of election rigging schemes on behalf of Chavez and current leader Nicolas Maduro. Smartmatic and Dominion have both denied that they have any connection to one another, while Dominion has denied having ties to any foreign government, including Venezuela. Dominion said that it purchased assets from a subsidiary of Smartmatic 3 years After it was sold by the firm, it was also this week that the Smartmatic voting machines were not used in at least some of the key states that were projected for Democrat challenger Joe Biden. Various secretaries of the state and the Department of Homeland Security have said that there is no evidence of voter fraud, and the cybersecurity chief said that the November 3rd election was the quote-unquote most secure in U.S. history. A 2006 U.S. diplomatic cable leaked by WikiLeaks years ago titled Caracas's view of Smartmatic and the voting machines, classified by former U.S. Embassy Counselor Robert Downs, noted that Smartmatic was formed by engineers in Venezuela and it was used in the country for years. The cable at the time described Smartmatic as a riddle and came out of nowhere to snatch a multi-million-dollar contract in an electoral process that ultimately reaffirmed Chavez's mandate and all but destroyed his political opposition. The company's software is used in the Philippines, various African countries, and several Latin American countries, among others. Smartmatic and Dominion have not responded to a request for comment. Following Powell's press conference, Dominion issued a statement rejecting the allegations. Dominion is plainly a plainly a nonpartisan American company with no ties to Venezuela or Cuba. The Colorado-based firm told news outlets on Thursday vote counts are conducted by county and state election officials, not by Dominion or any other election technology company. A system support tabulation by those officials alone. On Friday morning, Powell responded to claims made by Fox host Tucker Carlson over a request to present more evidence on Thursday's show. Carlson asserted that Powell became angry when he called to ask her for new information. I didn't get angry with the request to provide information, Powell told Fox Business on Friday. In fact, I sent an affidavit to Tucker that I had not even attached to a pleading yet to help him understand the situation, and I offered him another witness who could explain the math and the statistical evidence far better than I can. I'm not really a numbers person. Carlson was insulting, demanding, and rude, and I told him not to contact me again. In those terms, she added. And yeah, I mean, things are bound to get rather interesting. And here right now, there's 18 days until Congress certifies, and then 6 days later, or rather, 18 days until the states certify the election, and about 6 days after that when the Electoral College meets. So should be interesting to see what happens then. But in other news, Democrats and the media should not lecture about election contests because, according to William Jacobson from Legal Insurrection, they blew up all norms just to get Trump. There's this article from Legal Insurrection that says Democrats and the media blew up all norms to get Trump and shouldn't lecture about election contests. You maniacs, you blew it up. There were no norms left. Democrats and the media burned them all to the ground in the scorched earth attack on Trump that started before the 2016 election and continued without interruption through Election Day 2020. The Trump campaign and various allied Republicans are contesting the results of the presidential elections in several key states, particularly Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Some court cases have been filed, but the promise of more substantial legal efforts are in the offing. On November 5, I urged Republicans to stay the course on election contests and litigation. About 70 million Trump voters deserve the effort, but cautioned, at the end of the day, which could be just days or weeks away, we'll know if Trump and his team have the goods. Almost 70 million Trump voters deserve the effort. I also pointed out on November 7th that people should be realistic about the high hurdles to success, whether in recounts or litigation. You are not alone. You have over 70 million friends, is the title of the article. So it's not over, but we have yet to be honest with ourselves that it remains a long shot. Trump needs hard evidence of major fraud, miscount, or computer malfunction to prevail in court. A specific category of ballot that was not legally cast is not going to be identified, and it's going to have to be in a sufficient quantity to make a difference. Again, on November 9, I emphasized to stay focused on the prize. Folks, stay focused. Trump needs to find votes through recount or other vote count irregularity, or find a court to rule that specific categories of ballots were unlawfully cast, whether through fraud or contrary to election law. That's the prize. Focus on the prize. All that background and caution brings us to today. Today, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell held a press conference. Rudy laid out what he says affidavits and other evidence gathered shows about specific allegations of voter fraud, particularly or potentially involving tens or hundreds of thousands of votes. These affidavits are not all public, with the understandable claim that the people involved fear retribution from the same Democrat supporters who have been attacking people physically and via online campaigns. That evidence is going to have to be submitted to a court soon. The clock is ticking. The problem with the voter fraud, as related by Rudy, is that by his own account, the illegal votes have become merged with the legal votes because numerous safeguards were eliminated or not followed. What Rudy appears to be left with is a possible proof of widespread fraud, but no clear remedy. No judge or panel of judges is going to throw out several 100,000 votes in the city of Philadelphia just because some of the votes were fraudulent. If the election was stolen, it was stolen in pre-election procedure and in the election act process, and there may be no lawful remedy other than the ballot box in 2022 and 2024. Now, unlike Rudy, Sidney Powell offers few specifics. She has a unified theory of election software and hardware fraud that spans numerous countries, possibly 3-letter agencies, and an election night execution of a pre-existing plan across several jurisdictions. But something being possible is not the same thing as proof that it did happen. Powell says she has proof that it happened, but she offered no details today. It would shake our systems to the core if such evidence exists and is provable, but I don't think people should get their hopes up. Prove me wrong, please. I'm practically begging her to do so, but in the end, she's going to need proof, not conjecture. The Democrat and media reaction is to dismiss this effort as insane conspiracy theories, not worthy of consideration, challenging the election and refusing to concede is called a breach of all norms. Excuse me, but there are no norms left. Democrats and the media bring them all to the ground in the scorched earth attack on Trump that started before the 2016 election and continued without interruption through Election Day 2020. Do you remember when the resistance stalks Electoral College electors after the 2016 election in order to coerce them into changing their votes? When Democrat politicians declared the election stolen because the Russians took out Facebook ads? When many Democrats boycotted the inauguration and the first State of the Union address? Or when Democrats rioted in D.C. during the inauguration? And how Democrat politicians have justified and in some cases encouraged attacks on Trump supporters who in many big cities are now hunted for sport. I remember. I'm so old, I remember when Democrats hired a foreign intelligence agent to collude with the Russians to produce a phony dossier asserting, among other things, Trump paid hookers to pee on a bed in Moscow because Obama once slept on it, then leaked those details to the media in collusion with the director of the FBI, who himself went to the White House to meet the newly elected President Trump in order to set him up and create a pretext for leaking the dossier. Even before the election, Trump or Democrats and the media claimed unsavory ties between Trump and the Russians, and the Russian collusion assertion led to several years of efforts to paralyze the Trump administration, with once reputable law professors and political pundits throwing around accusations of treason that earned them reliable bookings on MSNBC and CNN, book deals, and hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers. I mean, I'm even so old that I remember how almost weekly major newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post would roll out serial quote-unquote bombshells showing Trump illegal or unethical conduct in office based on anonymous supposed intelligence and senior administration sources familiar with the matter. Yet, time and again, the bombshell proved to be a dud, to be followed by a new bombshell as the prior one faded. This created a continuous crisis news cycle. Now I don't believe these sources existed, or if they did, they were not as described, like the supposedly senior administration official who wrote an anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, only to reveal himself recently as a not-so-senior DHS official who didn't even serve in the White House or in a position to be close to Trump. The New York Times used his anonymity to create the false narrative of a senior official close to Trump ready to spill the beans. If the Times deceived the public about that, nothing it says about anonymous sources close to Trump should be believed. I'm also old enough to remember how Obama holdovers in the permanent bureaucracy leaked transcripts of diplomatic conversations between Trump and foreign leaders early in the administration, causing a serious breach of the president's ability to conduct the nation's business. Those same permanent bureaucrats continued to leak and conspire for decades. Believe it or not, I'm also old enough to remember when Democrats and the media told us Trump was sending his unmarked stormtroopers to scoop mostly peaceful protesters off city streets, but none of that was true. Or when we had a multi-week Democratic media frenzy about how Trump's goons supposedly were eliminating postal boxes throughout the country to prevent people from mailing in ballots, when it turned out that the images were a routine rotation of mail drop boxes. And how big tech giants and mainstream media openly silenced important information about Biden's and family influence peddling. I can go on and on. We threw out Trump derangement syndrome tag for hundreds of examples, and almost all of it was aided and abetted by never Trump Republicans. So don't lecture me about how Trump and his supporters are violating all norms of behavior expected of presidential administrations. Democrat and media maniacs blew up all norms. So I'm going to sit back and watch the election contests that are going on right now, stay the course. If the evidence is there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. We will abide by court decisions, but until those legal efforts are exhausted, there is no reason to listen to the people who defiled and destroyed everything they touched in their scorched earth effort to get Trump. Professor Jacobson does have a point there, just stay the course, just listen to Powell and find out just what happened or just what will be happening. But, of all that, there is one major concern by the establishment media, and that is, how did Trump manage to do so well? This from the American Spectator. Election day definitively confirmed the existence of hidden Trump voters. Undetected by polls and long denied by the establishment media, Trump's surprising surge had to come from somewhere. Either these supporters were hiding from pollsters or pollsters were hiding them. Regardless, their existence raises disturbing questions about the role played by the establishment media and pollsters in influencing this election. Election day provided the startling revelation that a contest that supposedly had been over for months actually would not be decided for days and perhaps longer. In reality, the blowout proved a nail-biter. More unsettling is the fact that the race probably had been this close all along, and the false impression likely influenced the outcome. As recently as November 12, the Real Clear Politics of national polling had Biden at 52.3% and Trump at 41.7%. The average on election day was 51.2% to 44%. As of November 18, the actual popular vote figures are Biden at 51% and Trump at 47.2%. From his November 12 or October 12 level, Trump's support increased over 13%. How could an error of such magnitude occur? Clearly, a lot of hidden Trump voters came from somewhere. The question is whether they were hiding or were hidden. Whether this is a sin of omission or one of commission has enormous implications for America's elections. After years' worth of concern about whether there had been Russian interference in our elections, it bears considering whether America has just fallen victim to internal tampering of a far greater degree. The establishment media's preferred answer to how the polls failed to detect millions of Trump voters is that the year was stupid, not sinister. Whoops, we just missed them. Despite this being pollsters' business, their assurance that they had fixed the polls' problems from 2016 and the mistake being of incredible size, as results show 2020's error is greater than 2016's. The establishment media has readily blamed the pollsters, essentially exonerating itself by saying that it was just reporting what it was told, yet neglected as a fact that the polls results were confirming the establishment media's own bias. This bias has been repeatedly cited for decades and has not been, and has never been clearer than over the past 4 years, as testament to the miraculous coincidence of pro-Biden polls and establishment media's pro-Biden bias. Consider the reverse. Would the establishment media have so readily regurgitated polling data showing the race as close as it turned out to be? Now, although freedom of the press is enshrined by the First Amendment, America does not have freedom in the press. Every opinion does not deserve equal treatment or, in notable cases, coverage at all. Self-censorship has been the establishment media's hallmark during this campaign, at least when it came to Biden. This occurred while it was telling America he was a prohibitive favorite to win the presidency, something which should have spurred media to examine him even more closely, since it was reporting he was so likely to be elected president. Nor did media lack for objects worthy of observation in the present or past, where Biden's almost half a century political record gave him one of the longest of any candidate in presidential history. The establishment media selectivity went well beyond bad journalism to good censorship. It also raises a serious question about today's real threat of undue influence. The First Amendment was intended to protect the press from government influence, but the 2020 campaign raises the specter that the reverse has become a danger. In 2020, the establishment media abused this freedom to the extent of trying to take a role in constituting the government. Perhaps it succeeded. There can be no doubt that it played a sizable role in the outcome. For 4 years, the establishment media has presented an accepted way of thinking on most prominent issues. The left has attempted to enforce conformity to the media's view. Together, they are partnered as good cop and bad cop in policing America's thought. Prominent issues are no longer covered as having competing points of view. Instead, there is an accepted point of view, the one best by the establishment media and enforced by the left, while the others are invalidated. Establishment media invalidation has become the cancel culture of the communication industry. Instead of the more aggressive turn of the left's cancel culture, it is a subtler but more insidious form of eliminating opinions with which the media disagrees. It invalidates these opinions simply by ignoring them. As Elie Wiesel said, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Failing to register, it ceases to exist. At some point, invalidation and distortion become disenfranchisement. If opinions are discounted to the point of irrelevance, many are likely to abandon them. If only one opinion is legitimately presented, coverage becomes distorted and the electorate uninformed. Being uninformed, a vote becomes devoid of content and thereby meaningless. If you are uninformed about the real state of the election, about the various sides of the issues, or whether your vote will be meaningful, you risk being effectively disenfranchised. Now, to the establishment media's message monopoly, that can be added social media's outright censorship of conservative messages during this election. Finally, Democrats had an overwhelming advantage in campaign cash to disseminate their message. Combined, these factors created the most one-sided campaign communication in presidential history. Despite these disadvantages, President Trump increased his vote totals dramatically from 2016. In 2016, Trump received 63 million votes and 46.1% of the popular vote. So far in 2020, Trump has received 73.6 million votes, or 47.2% of the popular vote, almost 8 million more votes than Clinton received in 2016, and over 10 million more than he received last time. What would have been the outcome? What would the outcome have been from a campaign conducted on a level communication field? In 2020, the establishment media played the most one-sided role in presidential election history, and arguably the largest in determining a contest outcome. Yet, despite this unparalleled transformation from reporter to participant, the establishment media's real concern is not over bias in its role, but that the bias was not more successful. That outside of California, 2020's popular vote is a dead heat. Its real question is not how the pollsters got the race so wrong, but how the voters did, despite the establishment media's best efforts. And that is so very true. I mean, you know, things things are not always what they seem, and it'll be very interesting to find out just what happens, and also just what the media's actual role was during this election. Leave leave a comment below where do you think it is, and I'll see you next week. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.